Warning, this podcast contains explicit sexual language and should only be listened to at work if you're looking for an excuse to connect with your HR representative. Additionally, all mentions of the word women include cis, trans, NB, genderqueer, gender fluid, and those still figuring it out. Yes, you are welcome here.
Will you open up with me? These pages, they can feed your innermost desires. Do you feel inspired? Are you getting what you need? Are you coming curiously? A secret safe with me. And here you can simply be yourself. Jay's Reads Romance. Come on in, come on in, come on.
Welcome back to Jace Reads Romance. Today is part 2 of my conversation with Courtney Abbott about consent and intimacy. If you have not listened to part 1, I highly recommend that you pause where you are, go back, take a listen, catch up, and join us here for part 2 when you're ready. If you are ready, let's get going. And that's a bigger conversation maybe. And how do we then start to demand more education to our partners, either because we educate them or because we demand it of how these interactions are portrayed?
Whew.
It's a really light topic.
I know. Okay, I have a couple ideas. Here are some of them. One way to reclaim, or to claim in the first place, a sense of ownership over one's physical form and one's physical pleasure and the access to one's physical form, I think is maybe best encountered in personal practice. So I would offer to all of your listeners, take a moment with your own body. Check in with your hands. You can touch your own skin and experience sensation with yourself. You can, in however you define it, masturbate to the most extreme pleasure you can possibly imagine, and ask yourself how you would name the thing that just happened. Because we do often need to use our words to get it across to our partner. The witnessing can only get us so far. So what words do I need to use to say, touch me like this, not like that, here, not there, there more than there, here first, here second, or whatever. I think all of that can be independent personal work. And it can come from the books that we read, the shows that we watch. It can come from identifying with a character and noting, okay, that feels like the right way to speak about that to me.
Mm-hmm.
But then I think crucially, we have to use those words out loud.
Yes.
And say to our partners, touch me here first, then here second. What if we tried this way? I really like it with myself when I blank, blank, blank. Will that work for you? Can you try it? Can I show you? Can I take your hand? And I think we have to actively go. Loving someone is teaching them and learning from them. And it's vulnerable. And that's the only way to get to a state of truly understanding one another, I think.
Yeah. I've mentioned on maybe just social media or on some episodes of the podcast that if you're not involved in an I just met you one night stand, because their communication is very limited and that time before might be very small.
I would say you can be even more direct and to the point if you're in such a situation and
yes.
say, I want this, this, and this, and I don't want this, this, and this. You can practice in those short-term ones.
Yes.
Makes it a little easier in your longer-term ones.
In the longer-term ones, people can feel a lot more feelings because the stakes feel higher in their intimacy. And so if you're new to this kind of conversation or these kind of words, or just even thinking of saying them out loud feels really vulnerable. Number one, practice on someone you don't care about. But 2,
just at the bank. My breasts hurt today. My boobs hurt today. Yeah, that's better. That's better.
Boobs, my tits, bazoingas. I don't know. I mean, but the having conversations about intimacy, sometimes the worst time to have them is when you're trying to be intimate, and you can kind of You can make it a foreplay, you can make it serious, but you can say to your partner over eggs one day, hey, tonight, I really want you to let me sit on your face. That would be amazing. Or tonight, let's try out that toy that I just bought. Or I'm really interested in like going a little harder on my nipples. Or what do you think about that? What have you been fantasizing about? And having those conversations when you cannot have sex, when the next step cannot be, all right, let's go do it, can give you and your partner a moment out of the vulnerability to go, what do I think about that? Do I like it? Maybe I'm going to think about that all day and it's super exciting. Or you're going to come home from dinner and say, hey, I know that you asked me to leave a bite mark on your shoulder and I'm not comfortable with that. Or I think we need to work up to that. Those moments when we have real autonomy without the rush of the endorphins, when everything feels good,
Sure.
when we're in those good human spaces. Our conversation with Princess Rara, our amazing switch dominatrix in that case, is you can always negotiate down but never up. So in moments when the emotions and the endorphins and the feelings are always so good, you might go, yeah, I'm totally ready for like, I don't know, anal. And you're like, nope. In my sober, not feeling all the feelings moment, we talked about training, about waiting, about taking this step by step. And like, that's what we're going to stick to because that was when we were of sound mind and not super horny.
Yeah.
And that can be a great way to bring those words and those things in.
Yeah. I also think it's impossible to talk about establishing consensual relations without acknowledging that a lot of people have had non-consensual contact in their lives. Whether that was within a romantic relationship, whether that was something they experienced outside of a sexual context, but was maybe nonetheless sexual in nature. They were teased for their body, or they were shamed for their expression, or they were assumed to be of a certain orientation, or now I'm just thinking of all the sad stories. We all have a lot of brushes with folks who don't care about consent.
Yeah.
That's just the truth of living in a world. So when we come to our partners with whom we want to have intense and vulnerable and intimate experiences, we might have some homework to do of our own to unpack how we feel about that vulnerability, or whether we have access to be authentic and to be truthful about what we need, and about how slow we need to go, or how escalated we're hoping things become.
No, it's true. And I think not to have this moment of acknowledging the experiences of so many does us a disservice. And we can't necessarily in this podcast episode change the past and the experience that people have. And I don't think this episode alone will change how we interact going forward. But what I do want, I do hope that this episode gives anyone who listens to it is hope that we can and will do better. And that this big disconnect that culturally exists and on a big spectrum and maybe personally exists in the microcosm of a single individual, that doesn't have to be the way that it is forever. And we can change, grow, and evolve toward that world that we want to see.
To me, it's really a question of how humane can we be to one another? How much can we acknowledge? I don't need to know your suffering. I don't need to know what you've survived in order to know that here you are living on this earth with me and we've all survived something.
It's the assumption that other people are not like us in some ways. And I don't want to necessarily stick to the binary, but men always want sex and women do want sex, but they have to tell you no. And so if they say no, they really mean yes, or whatever you were brought up to believe. Maybe it's that women don't like sex and sex is a chore. And so you should never expect for a woman that you have sex with to actually enjoy sex with you. Whatever you're raised to be, it comes down to believing that that person is other, that you as an individual, whoever you are receiving this information, are a sexual being who is deserving of sex with a willing participant, but they are different from you and your needs are more important. And you don't have to take into consideration their needs because their needs are completely separate from your needs. How could you even imagine? And
I mean, I think what you're gesturing at, Jace, is unfortunate belief that male ejaculation equals sex.
Oh, it's true.
And that message is spilled to everybody. I think that message is sent to every body, truly, to say, like, this is the pinnacle. This is the expression of human sexuality. And that leaves folks with vulvas as participants or accessories at best. And the person hoping to ejaculate with a single mission in mind, which is to achieve climax. That's unfair to everybody. That's not the way. This is not the way. But I do think that belief is the default. That's how we know sex has happened.
Yes.
Which leaves a lot of queer folks off on the margins and they're on their own, figuring out what to do with their fluids.
There's still a wet spot.
Hetero folks, misunderstanding maybe why their intercourse is not satisfying. It feels like it's doing what it's supposed to do, maybe, but it's not satisfying the need for connection or the need for mutuality. But until we start convincing folks that climax is individually defined within each individual form, and that any individual's sexual drive might lead them towards climax as a destination or not.
Yeah.
And that, I think, is a mutuality I would love to see, is of partners engaging to agree mutually, this is what this means, or this is what this is for. This is for our bodies. We're going to get a good sweat on, and then we're going to bounce. This is for our hearts. We've been apart for so long, and this is a coming together, and we're using our bodies to reincorporate our spirits, our energies, our love, or any of the myriad other ways that human beings can use any act of lovemaking for connection. I think we need to stop assuming that we know what everybody's in it for.
Yes. That is, oh man. Okay. When we assume that the other person is on the same page as us, that is where we can go so wrong. And the assumption that we are told and we are taught overall is that if you are someone who has already had sex, and I'm talking in broadly more heterosexual, but if you are someone who's already had penis in vagina sex, then that is what you should have in every sexual encounter. Every intimate encounter should be penis and vagina intercourse, because why wouldn't you? You've already crossed the threshold of every other moment.
And if the couple has somehow also managed to provide some sort of climax or orgasm for the person with the vulva, I'm curious how many of those couples out there in the world always have the P and V and sometimes have the stimulation of the person with a vulva. Because even, I think, modern couples who are trying to even the score frequently default to penetration as a matter of course.
Yes. And that is what intimacy is. And it's from point A to point intercourse. And anything between is unnecessary, because it's not like you've never done anything else before. So these assumptions of, if I am willing to make out with you viciously, I must also be willing to have sexual intercourse with you, P and VG intercourse, is very prevalent. And I'm not going to name this book. I haven't finished this book, and this scene is a huge moment of why I have had to put this down, and I am reluctant to pick it back up. So there is a couple. They've gone on a few. They've had some witty banter. They met outside of dating. They decide to go on a date. It was a really great date. They get back to her house. They start making out. Lovely. And if my recollection is correct, they are against her front door. They are outside. And he puts his hand up her skirt. He, number one, doesn't ask if he can kiss her. He just is like, meow. Puts his hand up her skirt. And we're in her point of view, and she's like, it was so great. And I'm like, but he didn't ask. What if it hadn't been? Also, what has that poor man been told, that if a woman is ready, is willing to make out with you, that if you're in public, she also wants you to stick your fingers up her clothing in a very intimate way. And it hit me so wrong, because up until this moment, he was so great and eliminated so many things that I believe should have been conversations. Like, number one, can I kiss you? I love that. I love a can I kiss you? Whenever I read it in a romance novel, whenever I see it on screen, that like hunger and that yearning, but that moment of like, I want to make sure you're there with me. I love it. Oh my goodness. But then to go just racing past all of these other forms of intimacy. It's not even like, and then he brushed his hand down my ribs and I got like the back of his fingers on the edge of my breast. And no, just up your fucking skirt. I was like, okay, great. What?
So like, I want to make this worse for you, Jace, because to me, that move, that the character who's doing the kissing and doing the up the skirt, to me, the motivation in that move is the kiss is the saying yes to this is moving into intimacy. And then the up the skirt is checking, is she wet?
Probably.
Which is also insane because what? Has your conversation on the walk home been so sensual that she's dripping by the time that you get to the door? Or was the mere brush of your lips against hers with her back against her front door really enough to open the floodgates? There's so many misconceptions about how women lubricate in these books. But cynically, I would say that's a man who's been taught to check. And I did air quotes for the people who are listening. and that's all. And so it wasn't for her at all. It was for him.
Which I get, like,
and again, not a question he asked with his mouth, like, "Hey, baby, are you wet? Do I make you wet? You want to go?" Like, I'm gonna check the oil myself.
And I don't want to assume that, like, I don't want to assume any person with a penis would be like, yeah, that's totally great, babe. But if I was like, great, our lips have touched, is he hard? Like, also, especially if you're not 25, if you're not 25 and below, there is also a process that takes some time.
I would say even for folks of all ages.
You know what?
There is no like automated vascular response that happens in the one beat that these novelists necessarily.
Yeah, and that also I think puts pressure. So many of these portrayals are like not helpful to anyone of any gender, anyone of any, genital combination. It's just not helpful, not kind. Like oh my God, anyone with any sex assigned at birth or who discovers a different, an intersex or something different later in life, none of it is helpful because those poor people with penises who read those or maybe see them and then they're like, wait, if I'm not hard immediately, something's wrong with me. And that's not fair to them. But quite honestly, I'm not here to talk about them. I'm not here to talk about cis het dudes and their issues with their penises. Go
they
to
just
your
keep
therapist.
making them everyone else's issues is the thing.
Yes, just go find a therapist and talk to them about it.
And also, please don't believe everything you see on TV and film. Like
it's not
be kinder
fair
to your body, please.
It's not fair to you either. And I'm stating that I, as someone who does not have a penis, can't give you any I can't corroborate or come together and be like, yes, isn't it terrible? I don't have a penis, but it is also bad for you. None of these things that we are fighting against or talking about as in this episode, in this podcast, in this world, in Jace Reads Romance, they affect you too. And you should also be rebelling against them and learning about them and doing better. However, I'm here to talk to women as I define them.
Yeah.
So how can authors, and I'm going to say authors because I talk a lot about books. How can they do better when writing moments of intimacy? Or even let's talk broader media because you also work in stage and you also, are connected to things that happen on screen. What are the things that you can see or read or watch and go, ooh, yes, more of that, please?
I know this is not where you think I'm going, but here's where I'm going. I have a long-standing love for the 90-10 rule from Hitch. Somebody listening knows this movie.
I know that movie, but I do not remember.
Hitch says you go in 90 and she goes 10. So you don't plant a kiss on somebody. You leave room for them to say yes and come back in. I love seeing the moment of decision for however many characters are involved in what's going on. And if I'm reading, I love experiencing things like a character noting their own breath, noting the movement or breath of the object of their desire. There's a lot of admiring of sculpted biceps and things like this, but there's something
Forearms.
particularly, yes, the knotted, ropey, muscular forearms, of course. So anyway,
Which are beautiful. They're beautiful.
which all the love. Yeah, maybe it's a requirement though to write romance novels. You like gotta have a thing for forearms. Yeah.
There's an entire episode about that. That's I
Oh,
have.
good.
Oh, there's going to be a part 2, y'all.
Okay, well, yeah.
Just you wait.
Cut all the things where I'm referencing things I should have listened to already by now. Gosh
No,
darn it, please.
But like, no, that's a fun one to listen
So,
to.
I really appreciate when an author directs me to the subtle movements in the on-ramp to intimacy. Things like breath, things like a soft touch or being in proximity to another person. Because I think by walking me as a reader through these moments where a character is embodied, I have a little bit more of a chance to remain embodied in my own life. And all of us, when we absorb this media, we are also giving ourselves the gift of a little more language to encounter our own experience.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think the more writers we have describing those moments of suspension, the way that time moves differently when we're moving into intimacy, even though I'm speaking in this sort of like Dove lotion voice, it doesn't have to be a soft, smooth, sensual kind of romantic episode. This can be hard and fast up against the garden wall. But all the same, there are decisions being made on the way there. And there are responses to the decisions that are made without discussion. So if my lover grabs me by the arm and has never done so before, the likelihood is that I react to that in some way.
Mm-hmm.
Whether I look at their touch or my breath changes as a result of them holding me differently. I think allowing for some of that might help us breathe a little life into the back and forth of relationship.
What I love about that statement is that it asks us to ground ourselves in the present of intimacy. And there's a lot in intimacy. Oh my gosh, what do I look like? What do I smell? Did I shave? Is my skirt too tight to easily get off? Am I going to have to pull my tights down? Do I want this? Do I want that? What if this is a true story. What if I trip on my way to the bed, fall against the bed, and scratch the shit out of my back on a bed frame? Yeah, very sexy moment.
Hazardous.
But, like bleeding bad.
Oh.
But like, so there's so many things that one could think about or get distracted by or get insecure by or worry about. Is my breath bad? Did I leave the oven on? I hope they don't touch my hair because I just got it blown out. And what I loved about the examples you gave is those are things that are happening in our bodies in the present, or we're observing in our partners in the present. And it reminds me that intimacy happens in the present. And the biggest gift that we can give ourselves and our partners is to be there when it's happening.
Yeah. And since we touched on the fact that folks bring all sorts of histories to their sex lives, that we also can tune into our partner enough to notice if they're no longer there.
Mm-hmm.
If they've left the building, if they've checked out, if they've gone to a place where their sense of how they look is overwhelming their ability to be in present time enjoyment of what we're doing. And that's where I say it's important for partners, however many, to agree on what the purpose of their encounter is.
Mm-hmm.
Because if it is only to achieve pleasure for one, you better be very clear about how that's going to go down. And if it is to celebrate being together regardless of outcome, then you've got to acknowledge that things might escalate, de-escalate, go a direction, go a different direction. And there might be a little more fluidity to the progression of things than what our general mainstream media would have us expect.
Yeah, this is something that I do, and I've noticed in queer literature, and I haven't sought out as much queer shows or TV movies as I do novels, but one of the beautiful things about the queer books that I've been reading is when you don't fit that mainstream, then the expectation is gone and you can decide what it is that you want. And there's I'm not saying there's more freedom, because with that comes a lot of its own baggage and situations. But if you, because of who you are and who your partner is, will never achieve penis and vagina, sex, intercourse, ejaculation, then that cannot be your goal. And you automatically have to decide, either as a human yourself or with your partner, on what is our intention with this. And a lot of the times it's like, well, I'm going to make you come until you can't see straight. And like, well, what if you can't have multiple orgasms? That's a different, that's its own thing. But when you take away the pressure to adhere to that, you automatically get to ask the question of, well, what do I want? If I can't achieve what the media has told me I'm supposed to or want to or whatever, then what am I here to achieve?
Yeah. And my wish is for every single human being, regardless of who they're getting down with, to ask themselves that. To say, to hell and be damned with everything I've seen on TV. What is my want here? What is my need? And then to be very real about that with their partner, because I think a handful of folks are going to come up with, I'm here to serve myself. Great, if that's what you understand. But be very clear about that with the people you're with, because they might not be down. That might not be their thing. And there's someone out there who will be all about it. That, to me, that's the glorious thing about human sexuality. It's so diverse. It is so endlessly diverse. And we're all growing and changing, and our bodies are growing and changing at all times. And our technology, I mean, come on.
Have you seen the vibrators that exist nowadays? It's amazing.
Yo, my dude. I mean, from the 2D batteries back in the day to where we are now. I was laughing to myself, Chase, earlier as you were saying, like, I don't have a penis. And I was like, well, I have a few, but they never don't get hard. They're just in a drawer hard all the time. Ready to go.
Always.
What can readers do when we read good examples of consent? I mean, I would hope that I'm not plugged into the romance readership community quite like you, but my hope would be that folks share that, or that, like, Kindle can show folks, this has been underlined X number of times.
Yeah.
My hope would be that folks would underline those, that folks would highlight that they would maybe share that with a friend or with a lover and say, like, oh my God, isn't this cute, funny, hot, silly, great? The fear of hearing no, I think, stops people who are for sure going to get a yes also asking. And if you've got a partner where hey, every Thursday we've got it blocked on the calendar, we're going to get down, you can still have a consent conversation with that person and be like, how do you want this to go? What do you want to do? Or, I see it's Thursday. Are you ready for me? And include the affirmation as a part of the positivity of your coming together.
There are definitely things in romance novels that you want in your life and things that you only want to read. And I don't want that in my life, but I want to read it in my books. And I think understanding also, like, what the difference is and where we can see it. And I'm going to build on that example of, like, every Thursday you plan to have sex. What if on Tuesday morning you talk about what you want? Okay, this time I really want us to, have some, like, intimate shower time, petting. We're going to go work out separately, or at the end of the day, we're going to come home. We're going to shower off all whatever it is. We're going to get petting. We're going to get there. I want to try going down on you. I want you to do this to me. Maybe we've got a new toy to play with, whatever it is. And that is, y'all, if someone, I don't know about you, but if someone's like, hey, here's exactly how I want to, like, pleasure you and what I really think would be fun for you to do to me, because I believe in your ability to pleasure me. Like, that's, oh my God, you think that I can, like, really sad? Like, that's empower. I love that. Yeah. And then Thursday might come on and your plan was to, I'm just going to go back to this because I also love the phrase. Maybe your plan was, I'm going to sit on your face. And an agreement that you have with your partner is that's not something you enjoy having done to you, or they enjoy doing when you get your period and you get your period. Well, then you have to have a different conversation and you have to say, like, hey, we agreed upon this thing, but let's pivot. How do we pivot? How do we converse about our wants and our needs and how they've changed from our expectation to the reality of this moment?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, you landed on in this moment because the intimacy is happening in the moment.
Right
All
then,
the
right there.
planning and all the prep, grand, but the consent needs to happen there. Yeah.
And things that I think I would love to see more of is how, because the joke, the joke is often that, oh, long-term relationships get boring and dull and this and that. And I think that can happen, and maybe for some does happen. But what that implies to me is you're not communicating on what do you need now. The needs of your body and the preferences of your body will change over time. And, you might get a knee injury. And so you can't cowgirl that dick anymore. You need to find a different position or put a pillow under your knees or whatever it is. And that's a conversation where you need to evolve as a lover and as a partner. And what it does is it keeps sex and satisfaction and communication in the forefront of your mind. And not all partners will be receptive to this, but hell, you could just send your partner a screenshot of a page. Oh my goodness. Maybe you've been reading about Good Girl for a while. You're like, I wonder what it would be like if someone said good girl to me. I don't know. Like just a little snippet. You're like,
Yeah.
hello, here, let's try this tonight. I might hate it, but I want to hear it.
Yeah. What you're describing is an invitation to play as well. That says, like, it doesn't have to, you don't have to bring me something perfect. I'm not bringing something perfect. We're bringing the authenticity of our relationship into our bedroom or into our sensual space. And we're going to improvise together. And that means, like, we might learn some things we need to change and learn some things we want to do more of. And that invitation to connect, I do think, is how it's possible for those long-term relationships to be infinitely interesting, to the contrary of that stereotype that a long-term relationship is inevitably going to become sort of tedious or dull. To me, that's a lack of imagination or curiosity between the partners.
And going back, we're wrapping it all up. Going back to what is the end goal of intimacy? If it is just a penis ejaculates and maybe a person with a vulva has a climax, but most likely not because women are hard to satisfy or vulvas are hard to satisfy. That's a topic for a different day. But I also want to highlight that if a plan goes awry, those moments are still intimate and beautiful. If you try something with your partner and it disappears, I've mentioned this with Seffi. I don't remember if this got into an episode, but there's a really wonderful novel. It's called Cleat Cute. It is a queer soccer ladies romance. Spicy. So spicy. And in one intimate moment, Phoebe does something a little too hard on Grace's nether regions, and she loses it. She's like, oh, nope, orgasm gone. I don't feel good. That hit the wrong spot. And for so many people, I think that moment could turn frustrated or angry or cruel. Well, how dare you not like what I was doing? God, your vulva's broken because I should be able to satisfy it. I can't believe, well, I don't believe you. Or like even Grace could have been like, how dare you ruin my orgasm? And in that moment, they have a discussion and Phoebe's like, hey, my bad. I'm so sorry. Can I just like continue to be intimate with you? And she's like, I'm gonna kiss your thighs, I'm gonna play with your legs, I'm gonna leave your vulva alone, I'm gonna suck on your breasts, I'm gonna do other things in that moment, because I learned, and my goal right now is to just be with your body. And like that's a moment when sex goes awry And that can ruin it. You could storm off or be angry and really break some of that connection. If your goal is connection, you've just broken it. And instead, they choose to shift and change it up and reevaluate
and pursue
move
the goal
forward
of pleasure.
and pursue the goal of pleasure and connection.
Yeah, nice.
So we feel like we've given so many examples of how do we put consent into our own lives, or how do we arrive at a state of consent or open ourselves up to that. If there is something that we maybe have missed, what are some last tips, tricks, things that our listeners should know about bringing consent into, yes, their intimacy, but also just their lives?
If any of you find yourselves answering emails with a sense of resentment that email even got you, you might have a zone to implement some consent practices around communication in your life. I drew that because that's one of mine. Is as a freelancer, my communication regarding my work can really spill into all hours of my day, all days of my week. And so I consent to engage with my freelance work at certain times for certain durations, and I have boundaries around when I will no longer do that. I have a friend with whom I have a long-standing invitation to come and visit. I have a key to their house. We still have conversations about when it would be appropriate, when it would be beneficial, when it would be least disruptive for me to do so. Those are consent conversations. I tell the people at the auto shop, please don't call me that when they call me something that I don't want to be called. That's also a consent conversation. Little lady isn't necessary. You can call me Courtney. I do not consent to being diminished in that way because that's how it feels to me. Now, that person might have meant something perfectly lovely in their own mind by saying it. I don't consent to receive it. Great. Our relationship is not broken. They will still fix my car. They'll just call me by my name instead of a nickname. This has a potential to get abstract, but I think sometimes we're not very consensual with ourselves in terms of the effort, energy, or time that we give to relationships in our life, to our jobs, to our extended families, to our communities. I know a lot of people who cross their own boundaries in an effort to be good. And I think the belief there is, well, if all of us do it, if all of us give a little more than is comfortable, then everything will get done. We'll have picked up the slack. But certainly in the entertainment industry, we're very aware at this moment of burnout, that artistic burnout is complicated and tough to manage and tough to predict. And with the irregularities of our lives, we have to be extra careful to really gather our resources and use them consciously. And I want that for everyone. I want folks to be loving on the people in their lives out of a sense of joy and love, not a sense of obligation and the dismay that it's already too late, I haven't done enough, I'm trying to play catch up. So one way to implement consent in your life, dear listener, is to consider your own capacity and your own desires, what you want from the people around you and what you want to give to the people around you. And then work on having those conversations about where the boundaries are. And you'll note probably pretty quickly that there's some folks in your life who effortlessly respect your boundaries. Or maybe they make an error once and then correct themselves. And then there are some folks who really aren't putting a lot of effort into honoring your boundaries. And I don't love a binary, but on that sliding scale of the folks who really do their best and the folks who couldn't be bothered, you might find that there are some folks who don't deserve to be as close to you as they are because of that lack of respect, because of that lack of effort on their part to meet you where you need them to meet you.
Oh, thank you so much. Courtney, this is, I think, a conversation that is so important to be having for any human, just any human in general, any person that exists. And I'm so glad that I got to have it with you first in this medium, staring at your face through a screen, because we would have gotten nothing done if we were in person. Absolutely nothing. But
it would have been all kissing.
Oh, thank you. Oh my goodness. Great callback. Courtney, if someone hasn't listened to our first episodes, tell these humans where they can find you to interact with you and love on you.
Wonderful. My website is my full name, CourtneyAbbott.com, ABBOTT. And you can find me here on Jace Reads Romance.
Yeah. I'll also link Instagram. I think, who knows where TikTok will be, but
I know, up in the air right now.
Up in the air. But this is being recorded after the house and before anything else. So who knows? Who knows? There are the 5 questions we normally typically ask and answer. I made you do this just a few months ago. Do you think you have different answers?
Only a little bit, because I was gifted a new Kindle for Christmas time.
Ooh, tell us.
So I very much enjoy reading romance on my Kindle. Now, my previous one was, I don't know, 7 or 8 years old, and it's just incredible to me the ease and the comfort of being able to slip that into my bag and know that whether I'm reading something with a scandalous cover or not, it's private for me. I'm just delighted by the tablet reader. And I have been taken comfy sexy on the road. I hope you approve, but
always.
There's sort of a uniform for movement professionals in theater, and it's mostly all black, sort of rolling around on the floor clothes, sweatpants, tank tops and t-shirts or things. So I'm a much more colorful person than that, and my wardrobe of comfy, colorful sweats, tank tops, and t-shirts are going with me to all my rehearsals these days.
Yes. Yeah.
I've also just started naming it Comfy Sexy, which I find people respond to really beautifully.
Oh, yay.
Yeah.
Yeah, y'all. Comfy Sexy. Tag me in that shit.
And I can't remember if we talked about the word sorry last time we were on this, but I feel like I should share this. I think you'll love it. I was introduced to this concept by an ex's mom who did this with her women's group. Anytime someone said the obligatory, I'm sorry because I exist, that sorry that women often say, they are obliged to then say, I'm sexy, to sort of balance it out.
That's brilliant.
And what I have found is that means even if I think to myself one of those, oh, sorry, my brain also now says, oh, sexy. And there's nothing wrong with that. We receive negative input so much more deeply than we do positive input. It's a way to create some positive input around an action that I can only think has been ingrained in us by patriarchy, that this constant desire to apologize. So
yes,
I'm trying to spread the word everywhere I can that you're not sorry, you're sexy.
That is absolutely going in my mental bank. That
Fantastic.
is 1,000% happening. Even if it's just in my brain and not always out loud. I feel like there are some places when people will be like, wait, that was not what I expected you to say. Cool.
I will also say that an authentic apology is a great element of a consensual relationship.
Mm-hmm.
If we're endeavoring to be consensual, we might cross boundaries. We need to be able to acknowledge that and move forward. And that means actually saying sorry for the harm that was done, taking accountability, and letting the individual who's harmed know what we're going to do to make sure we don't do it again. If I had crossed a boundary by offering to kiss you on your podcast, I might say, I'm so sorry, Jace. I absolutely crossed a boundary by offering to kiss you on the podcast. And now that I understand that that's a boundary, I will not do that again. I will only offer to kiss you in real life.
Y'all, that makes me laugh so hard. It makes me laugh not because apologies aren't serious. And I agree wholeheartedly that a heartfelt, honest apology is an important part of existing in a state of consent and building that relationship with a person that you are hoping to just be with. It doesn't have to be intimate. It's a person. It just makes me laugh because Courtney makes me laugh.
And laughter is a great sign that a relationship is moving in a forward direction, right?
Oh,
if we're breathing and laughing and vibrating together, then we're doing okay.
Well, y'all, I hope that you have gotten something out of this conversation that I've been lucky enough to have with Courtney. I don't know. I got a lot out of this conversation that I got to have with Courtney, including an invitation to kiss her in real life. Maybe, kind of. I'm not sure. But This is not a one and done conversation. This is an evolution and a practice that we should be having. And my dearest hope is that a year from now, 4 years from now, decades from now, that the conversation around consent is still happening, because it will always be there, but that we have evolved far, far past the conversation that needed to happen today. So thank you for being a part of it and being here with us. I have an incredible rest of your day. Bye.
Thanks, Jace. Bye.
That's it for today, y'all. This has been a 3 Paws Productions podcast. Our producer is Seffi. Michael Achenbach is our patient editor. Our theme song is written and performed by Diana Weishauer. You can find show notes and so much more at jacereadsromance.com. That's JAYCE Reads Romance. Follow along on TikTok and Instagram at Jace Reads Romance. If you'd like to ask a question or share a story for the podcast, call and leave a message at 661-JACE-RR. That's 661-529-2377. Or send an email to jace@jacereadsromance.com. Finally, like and subscribe so you can get every episode when they drop. You can also leave us a review to help others find us. And remember, this is Jace holding space for you.